But hey, everybody, there we are. We're back for the next round of things, our last round trip of what we're doing. Real connections is our third theme of what we're doing. Again, we're starting it all together. Before we dive into that, I just wanted to check in and see how everybody's doing. So real quick, how are people doing? Good? Things all right? Things all right? Good. Yeah, a couple quick things. Again, we'll do our session here and then the breakout, so that's the flow that we'll be doing. Then after that, we're going to be doing a very interactive networking experience because that's been a very popular theme amongst all of you. And we're going to really dive into that here in a little bit. Then after that, we're going to feed you. This is going to be inside this time. So yes, you ain't got to worry about any cold breezes or anything. But with that, we got a very special experiential way of how we're going to do the meal. And so that's my little teaser for that. Definitely want to do there. All right. So, one last thing too. If you haven't done it already, feel free to do the rate us thing. Those little QR codes, they're floating around in different spots. We definitely appreciate your feedback. Okay. All right. So now I'm super excited to dive into this panel. This panel is called Home Away from Home. And we're just going to dive into the whole topic of imposter syndrome. We're going to play around with that, talk about it, unpack it, beat it up, all those different things there to really just dive into that. Because all of us have some type of relationship with that word. And yeah, let's dive into that for a minute. And so with that, you can cue up the music. Yeah, I want to welcome my panel to the stage. So come on up. Yeah, come on up, panel. My esteemed panel. There we go. There we go. All right, cool.
I think this is my lucky chair.
It is.
Yeah.
It is your lucky chair.
Don't call me first.
Don't call. Okay, I'll skip
It
you
goes-
for now.
I see that Morehouse man. All right.
Yes, we do have Morehouse in the house. Yeah.
Other Morehouse men in here?
Any Morehouse men?
Because all right, there we go. Because
Yep.
I'm going to let Dr. Thomas, I saw y'all now.
There we go.
There you go. There we go. All right, I'm going to let them know y'all here in the house.
There we go. All right. Yeah, so Home Away from Home is how we're going to do it. And Jeanine knows my style with this, but I'm going to introduce everybody and then shoot them a quick question about who they are. And I'll start with you, Dave.
Yes.
Dave Moody, CEO of Moody Construction. Done a number of amazing things when it comes to the construction business, especially in the metro Atlanta area and beyond. But so that's who Dave, that's his role, what he does. But real quick, Dave, who is Dave Moody?
Dave Moody is a person who is just happy to be here and alive. I mean it. And even with all the challenges of life, I'm just thankful. I really am. And what I'm most proud about who I really am is a father, a husband of 42 years, and a grandfather. And that means more to me than anything else. The fact that my wife kept me for 42 years, my children work in the business and actually like being with their daddy, and my grandkids have never heard the word no from their grandfather.
Good grandfather. All right, that is Dave. All right, so Cassandra, we'll move to you next. And so Cassandra Johnson, Vice President, Platforms and Devices here at Google. And Cassandra, who is Cassandra Johnson?
Okay, so since Mr. Moody did it one way, I'm just going to go a totally different way since we just had this amazing affirmation speaker prior. So I'm Cassandra Johnson, and I'm a badass woman.
Okay.
That's all to it, who just happens to work in an amazing company with some amazing colleagues like Jeanine, and just enjoying life and really proud. I just sent a comms out to my team, having a front row seat of my son who's a junior in high school and seeing him go through his journey. And I think that's just one of the proudest moments you can have is helping nurture others and so forth. And I'm also from the Atlanta area. I went to school here, not at the AU Center, but we knew a lot of people at the AU Center. I went to Georgia Tech. So just proud and honored to be here. So thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And so we all know Jeanine, so you know.
Yeah, I
there
see
you
some
go.
familiar faces. So I answered this question earlier. A couple additional details I'll give is I'm a fiercely loyal human. it's all about loyalty and respect for me, and a couple of other things that are core values for me: optimism, but not just like, oh, I'm optimistic, just, not grounded. Optimism in terms of power, optimism to get back up, optimism to keep going, optimism to see better, want better, go for better. And so that's like number one, and I said respect, and number three is integrity.
Okay.
I want to be that person. You see me in my sweatsuit, my hair is not done, I have no makeup on, I'm at the supermarket, you see me, I don't see you, but you see me. You're like, oh, that's Jeanine. I still recognize her even though she don't know I'm looking. I want to be that person.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Jeanine. Yeah. All right. So imposter syndrome, and Dave, we're going to start with you on this one. We'll just start off with the word. I want to define, what imposter syndrome is, as well as what is not imposter syndrome. So Dave, we'll start with you on that. What is and is not imposter syndrome from your experience?
That's a great question and something to talk about because, I'm 68. I'll be 69 in May. So I grew up in the 60s. You got to think about when I was watching TV as a kid, I saw nobody black on TV other than butlers or whatever. Then finally we got Julia, but she was a single mother as a nurse. And then we got Good Times and a couple other things. So I grew up in a time where I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me doing what I'm doing. So, and I grew up in a time where I was taught and trained, you got to be twice as good. And, and I came to Morehouse in 1974. I came 50 years ago to Atlanta. And I remember Maynard Jackson had only been a mayor a year then. But Morehouse instilled in me that I could be whoever I want. But what I realized even today, there were things that were put in me in the 60s that actually made me limit my dreams and what I thought I could do. And I'm also the first in many things. I've been the first president of our Rotary. I was the second for our Rotary clubs, for the Boy Scouts. I was first for the Associated General Contractors. So I'm often the first or one of the few. And I realize I carry an extra load sometime when I go in a room. I don't code switch, but I realize often I'm wondering, are they watching me? Am I saying these words right? Did I do this right? And I don't say it a lot, but I'm saying it to myself. And so often I leave things, I'm exhausted. Now, I'm not that now because I don't care. But, like at 65, I went and got my ear pierced and everything.
There you go.
I don't care.
There you go.
Got my tattoo on my forearm.
Living life.
But when I was coming along, you didn't think about that in professional life.
True.
So the imposter thing is what we allow to, okay? I allowed those negative thoughts to make me feel often I was less than, or they're judging me, or they're watching me. So the imposter syndrome is what we allow. If you walk in there like, I deserve to be here, then an imposter thing, you don't even got to worry about it. And I'm going to challenge each and every one of y'all to understand, you are created to be incredible. What stops us is our mind and those negative thoughts, and I call it the trickster part of the brain that tells you what you can't do because you're not good enough or you're not tall enough, whatever it might be. You leave all that behind, because I'm telling you, every one of y'all in this room, you are made to be incredible if you will believe it and put the work in. And you're going to get knocked to your knees, but every one of us is stronger than we realize, I promise you.
Wow, yeah. Yeah. And then Jeanine, curious to get your thoughts as well on that.
So, I think a lot of times, like when we hear the term imposter or imposter syndrome, we don't necessarily associate that with being a perfectionist or perfectionism. But, I was looking into this because I'm like, what's really going on here, right? And it also, you might be, and I think I saw this with myself at a young age, someone who feels like you have to be perfect, And then when you don't meet that bar, whatever that bar seems or to be for you, then you're like, I'm not good enough. Nothing I do is good enough. And for me, I think that got planted. I mentioned earlier that I'm one of 8, and I'm from Brooklyn, New York. And my mom just was like, hustler, queen hustler. She's gonna figure out how to make it work. And so she instilled that in all of us. And so what turned out to be is I worked hard in young grades, lower grades, and I was able to be the first in my family to graduate high school, to go to college, and to go into a professional career. And that just felt like such a responsibility. Like, I have to bring everybody along, not just like myself or my siblings or my mom, but my whole neighborhood. I feel like everything was riding on me. I gotta do this right. I can't fail. I gotta be strong, because if I get weak and I can't handle it, I can't keep going, then who else is gonna then what are people gonna do? What are people gonna feel? And so earlier in my career, like the first 10 years, I definitely was carrying that. I definitely was like, oh no, I didn't do that presentation good enough. Oh no, I didn't do this good enough. Even though my family was always proud of me. They were always like, oh my goodness, Jeanine, they were giving me, and I would just nod, but it never felt right. And so in the professional setting, back in the office, I was fighting that and not feeling like I was like worth it or able to do it. Later, as I was able to get some coaching and support from others, which we could talk about more, I realized that actually this imposter syndrome, I think it's not so much a syndrome with me. I think it's other people's syndrome that they're projecting onto me. The feelings they have about themselves, or they might have about me, that they want to ingrain into me, and then now I'm sitting here like, oh, I have a problem. I don't belong. I can't make it. And so when that hit for me, I just, like you said, like, oh no. Every room I'm going in, I'm like, ha, 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 get ready, get ready. I'm excited to be there, to just be me in those spaces. And I belong because I'm human.
Yeah, that's powerful. And Cassandra, we'll get you in the
Yeah, and I'll just add on to what both they have shared. I think my upbringing was kind of unique because I grew up in Alaska. And there was no, I think it was just part of how we were raised. It was like, just go for it. It wasn't go for it because you're female, go for it because you're black, go for it because whatever. It's just go for it, have fun. And I think it wasn't until I went into my first corporate job where I realized, wait a minute, people are looking at me differently because I am female or a person of color in an engineering field and so forth. And so to Jeanine's point, that's when I felt the burden. You knew it was a blessing, but then you felt the burden. But then I realized that, you know what, this is just not my burden to carry alone. And so this is when you have to really bring your village, but also bring those who may not understand and help them be educated or be aware of how they can help and how they can lean in and so forth. Because I remember talking to one of our allies, and he was the most amazing ally. But one of the things that I told him that was like so different from us was the fact that, you know what, he was an amazing ally 9 to 5. But then at 5 or whatever, he left, and then it was just him going into his, bubble or whatever the case may be. And I was like, you know what, Clay, guess what? After 5 o'clock, we're still in who we are. So it's almost like a game where I said, when they get tired, they can raise their hand and say, Coach, I want timeout. For us, we're in this game 24/7, and we have to be present. But I think part of the aspect, too, was realizing, to Jeanine's point, is I didn't have to be someone that they felt I needed to be. It was more, who am I comfortable being with, being at that time or at that moment? And I think that was kind of like my epiphany as I think became more aware, more mature, and more confident. Because I think for a lot of time, a lot of people who know me, I'm kind of like, outspoken. Like Jeanine and I have this over the top kind of personality. And a lot of times it was like, wait a minute, I got to act a certain way. But then and people are like, sorry, well, you're not authentic. But then I realized, putting it just into our day-to-day lives, I was like, look, I am being authentic. Because just like I wouldn't behave a certain way with my mom or grandparents than I would with my sorority sisters or girlfriends, that's the same as at work. Or I wouldn't talk the same way to our senior pastor as I would, one of our friends. Like you, and it's not that you're not being authentic. It's more you're being respectful and appreciative of the relationships you have. And I think that is where I moved from being, is this an imposter, but to more being truly who I am and who I'm comfortable being at that moment, at that time, and so forth.
Yeah, the many different elements of who we are. And so one big takeaway that I'm getting just from listening to all of you is that it's not necessarily a question about what is or is not imposter syndrome. It's more so about the voices that we're telling ourselves or the things that are just running through our minds as we navigate our day, our life, the different spaces that we're in. There's an old sports phrase, the person who believes they can and the person who believes they cannot are both right. Which one are you? So it's a very similar thing that I'm thinking when it comes to that. Just the stories we tell ourselves are extremely critical. And so with that, I wanted to go ahead and...
But Larry, one thing I just want to...
Yeah.
I also just want to acknowledge, though, that I don't think it's just strictly what we tell ourselves.
Okay.
There are external messages coming at us.
That's true. What
and
narratives?
We hear things from people, from media, the end of that meeting, I don't know, I'm sure you all have had this happen. You do your presentation, the meeting's over, and everybody flocks over. Where did you go to school? And I'm like, wait, who else getting asked that question? Oh, you're surprised? You get the messages. These are not, so...
Yeah.
That's true.
It comes from inside, but it also comes from outside.
Outside, yeah.
And I guess when I was talking about
Go ahead.
the inside, once those things happen to you a couple of times, we end up making it more. So because you will, and it's funny. Sometimes I walk, and it doesn't happen as much now, but I would walk into a meeting, and they would go, "Where's Mr. Moody?" And I go, I don't know, I'm looking, where is he? Yeah, but it's true. And then especially y'all being in engineering, when I first got in construction, women didn't even exist. And they might be in the office, but on a job site, I mean, it's interesting how professions like construction, women have a really tough time. Like I tell my daughter, I said, look, you got to be hard in this because they're going to challenge you. They're going to push you. And it's just amazing that there are some professions where they're male-dominated or whatever, and you'll be surprised. Just like in my I've been in business 37 years, and to this date, on big projects like we've done Mercedes-Benz and all kind of stuff that $400 million up to $1 billion, I've never seen a black lead on the project who's the project director. I'll see all the other positions. Now, on our projects, the people are of color who are in the lead. But there's still places we don't crack that ceiling. So there's still work to be done.
Yeah. That's a great addition because, the environments that we're in, those things can influence and saturate or infiltrate our minds. Yeah. So now the next thing I wanted to dive into is just the whole topic of worth. Because you have to know your worth, know your worth, don't give your worth away, all those things like that. I wanted to unpack that idea. Like, how do you determine your wealth? If we kind of go along with that phrase, how do you determine your wealth? How do you increase your value? What are some things that can decrease your value? Things like that. And I'm even particularly curious about those times where, you believe your worth is here, but the people around you think your wealth is here. And so how do you navigate that gap? And so that's what I want to dive into there. So I guess the first thing is, how do you determine your worth? Know your worth, what does that mean to you? Anybody?
Y'all want to go first? Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to tell y'all a quick story because this is when I learned my worth. When I first met and this is important because be careful about the people you say you can't stand because they might become your life partner. So my wife and I met at 16. We were 16 years old, and a buddy said, hey, man, I want you to meet this lady, this sister, come over to the, So I go to her house, and I'm kind of full of myself. I'm a quarterback, football team and stuff. And back in the 70s, this is 1972, I walked in the house and met her. I said, look, I'm number 12 in your program, but number 1 in your heart. And she ignored
Got some
me.
game.
She ignored me. And I said, if I ever see her again, it'd be too soon. Well, 3 years later, 19, I come back after my first year of college, and one of my teammates, I'm home in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and he's in Detroit, 40 miles apart. I said, hey, Kenny, I'm going to get us some dates for the weekend. So I was trying to talk to my wife's friend. So I called her. I said, get somebody for Kenny. She gets my wife. So I go get Kenny, and we're going out for the weekend. We're going to go out Friday and Saturday night. Now, you got to remember, I couldn't stand my wife 3 years ago. So we get in the car, and I'm with the lady I'm taking up in the front because I'm driving, and my wife and Kenny in the back. But after, we were kind of talking before we got in the car, and I started going, man, she's not as stuck up as I thought. Wait a minute. So the whole night, I'm figuring out how to keep them from making really that eye contact or kissing.
Playing defense.
But this, look, it's my turf. So the next day, see, folks, this was before Google. We had to think. I couldn't Google how to get rid of them. So we spend the whole night, I sit between them at the concert. Yeah, but I'm playing it off smooth, though. They don't know what's happening. So the next morning, I made sure they didn't kiss or anything. I made sure, I said, because if we kissed, then, bets off. Next morning, we wake up, and I go, Kenny, I said, you know how dads are. He said, man, I'm not doing my chores. I need to take you back to Detroit. I said, we ain't going to be able to go out tonight with them. So I took him back. I came back, called my wife to be, that I didn't know would be my wife. I said, look, Kenny had to go back to Detroit. True story. My wife will tell you the story. I said, I'll take you out. 7 years later, we got married. The reason I tell you that story, I knew my worth. I knew I was worthy of her. And she has been with me for 42 years. We got married 7 years later after that, got rid of Kenny thing. And no, I didn't give him a chance. But here's the best part of that story. Right before we get married, Kenny flies through town. He calls me. He go, and we're talking. I hadn't seen him in about 3 or 4 years. He said, man, what's up? I said, man, you ain't gonna believe this. I'm getting married. He said, who are you marrying? I said, remember that girl we went out? He thought the one I went with. I said, no, the one you were with. He went, what? Hung up. I haven't talked to Kenny since 1982. But the reason I tell you that story, and we happily married, hey, you look.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
You gotta do what you gotta do. You understand? So
this is real talk right here. This is real talk right here.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do. And the reason I tell y'all that story, my wife, I knew my worth. When I started my business, I knew my worth. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to tell you something. The reason I love telling that story to young people, because I'm telling you something, when you find and you get that right person, there's nothing you can't do. But my wife has built my worth up. She made me feel worthy. In 1992, I had a nervous breakdown from dealing with a childhood trauma. I won't get into that because I don't want to trigger anybody. But my wife ran to me, not from me. And that's when you realize your worth. When somebody, your friend or somebody, when they will run to you when you need them, when you will run to them when they need you, that's when you know I am worthy. And because of what happened to me as a child, it really messed up my self-esteem and all kind of stuff, but I always faked it well and wore that mask. It wasn't until recently, because I finally got a trauma therapist in 2021 and did cognitive behavioral therapy, and I got deep into the trauma. I finally dealt with that. I hiked Mount Kilimanjaro in 2023 to push myself and test myself. But I did all these things, and it finally hit me about a month or so ago, because I've been feeling different in a good way. And I finally realized who I am is enough.
Okay. It's okay. Yeah.
I finally realized who I am is enough. So that's, once you realize who you are is enough, your worth will go through the roof, because you know you are worthy. You are worth something. You matter. And for all you young men out there, you use your number. If you play sports, you tell that young lady, I'm number 12 in your program, but number 1 in your heart.
That's the soundbite. Mic drop right there. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, that's how we taught in 1972.
Yeah. Jeanine or Cassandra, any thoughts just on worth? How you determine it? Is it overthink? Anything like that? Anything.
I'll give another perspective other than Mr. Moody is I would say when you look in as far as corporate America, I'll give an example. I think, someone always told me it's kind of like your bank account. You got to build up your credits before you can make a withdrawal.
Okay.
And then you also have to put in that time and prove yourself, or I didn't even want to say prove yourself, but have that impact, showcase the value you bring and whatnot. And I'll go back to when I was at Visa. I just had a really, really great experience. I, was just really great outcomes and so forth. But to Mr. Moody's perspective, it's when I was working at Visa that when I was traveling abroad, I kept getting a call from Google. And Google kept calling, and I kept avoiding the calls until I had like a 3-hour layover in Hong Kong. And I was like, what the heck? Let me take the call. And so they were like, hey, Cassandra, there's a role we think you'll be right for it. And I was like, no, I'm okay. I'm happy with my role, happy with my, the position and so forth. And they were like, can you just talk to our COO? They just want to talk to you and so forth. And I was like, me being from the South, I was like, let me pick the worst time that someone would want to talk to someone. And so I was like, fine, I am free on Sunday at 2 o'clock. I figured they'd be eating and they wouldn't want to talk to me. But lo and behold, she wanted to talk. I was like, damn, I got to talk to her. And so what started off as we thought just a 30-minute quick conversation really turned into like an hour or two conversation. And what we talked about was not work. It was not what the role was. It was her as a leader and me as a leader. And most importantly, we spent most of the time just talking about our kids and our family. And then at the end of it, she was like, hey, would you mind just coming to visit us in California? And I was like, oh, so nothing to lose, so let me go visit and so forth. So then I, flew in, got to meet with the SVP who at Google's kind of upside down. It's really like a president role, right? So met with him as well. And they offered me the role. And what was interesting is, this goes back to Moody not being number 12, but number 1 in Google's heart, I like to say at that time. It was like when they offered it, they made it seem like, hey, this is a great offer. But then I went and I really knew my worth, because being a female person of color in a technical field, and at the time I was SVP, is not many around. And I knew that. And so I felt so comfortable and confident telling the executive recruiter, look, I know I'm a black unicorn, and I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with my current role. So I was like, this is what I need for me and my family. And we had this conversation, and basically it was able to work out. It was a really, really, it was a right thing for my family, not for me personally, but my family. And this goes back to knowing your worth. I remember when I finally told the president I reported to I was taking this role. Next thing I know, my assistant called. He's like, Serna, Al wants to talk to you. And I was like, Al? And it was the CEO, Al Kelly, a Visa call. He's like, Serna, let's talk. And so he said, hey, I know you're taking this role with Google. Google's a great company. And he was like, let me ask you this. Why are you taking a role? And I was like, you know what? The role is great, but it's because I think it's the right role, the right company for me and my family at this time. And he was like, that's all I needed to hear. You need to go. And he said, hey, but by any chance, if you're not happy there, if it's not what you thought, call me. because we would love to have you back at Visa.
Wow.
And I think that shows, to your point, your worth. It doesn't have to be any title. It doesn't have to be anything. Because I've told some of my team members, I'm sure Jeanine and Moody have, we've encouraged them to take on new opportunities. But for those amazing team members who are more than team members, they are so critical and value added. I've also said, if it doesn't work out, please call me and come back. So that's one way I look at how I assess what my worth is and so forth.
Yeah, that's part of the
Oh,
relationship.
I love it. I love it.
Uh-huh.
So when I was in high school, December of my senior year, my mom had a mental break. She left the family for a few years. We didn't know where she was. And it really broke all of us. But I was the eldest that was still living at home at the time. And she and I were like, we were friends. And so when she left and I had my youngest siblings, we moved in with my eldest sister who had 6 of her own kids. So it was like 4 plus 6. So yeah, you can count. And she was 26 at the time, my eldest sister. And so that just broke me. I was like, I'm done with life. I'm just pretty much done, you know? And I really was like, I'm going to drop out of school. I don't want to do anything. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't think I was going to be doing anything. And so I was a decent student. And my assistant principal, Dr. Michelle White, she heard about what was happening, but at first I didn't tell anybody, but people kind of got wind, like my gym teacher, he started bringing lunch, and he would put it in his little mini fridge in his office, and at the end of gym, he would say, yo, Mitchell, that's my maiden name, I got something in the fridge, you know, because we didn't have enough food, like my sister couldn't provide for all of us, so I was trying to like go without. I was sleeping on people's couch. I was homeless because I didn't want to be a burden to her. She had so many other children to worry about. So I was sleeping on people's couches. I was sleeping in cars, just trying to do whatever. I was like, I'm done. And so Dr. Michelle White, she started to hear rumors about what was going on and that I was on the verge of dropping out of high school. And, okay. Dr. Michelle White is the same person who, in my 8th grade year, she broke up a fight that I started.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I started this fight. It was not good. I never started a fight before. But I was in a new place, new district, new city, and I was trying to prove myself. And everybody heard I was from Brooklyn, so it was like, oh, you must be tough. And I was like, I have to prove something. So I started this fight. It was ridiculous. She sat me in her office and said, you know, you're a beautiful girl. So why are you acting like a dog? Shook me. Made me focus on work and school after that. No more fights, no more cutting class. Fast back forward to senior year. So I was the girl she knew, and she was watching me throughout these years. And now I'm in 12th grade. She starts to hear I'm going to drop out. She comes. I happened to be with my sister at my sister's house one evening. I dropped by my eldest sister to see my siblings, see if they were okay. And Dr. White, she got our principal, Dr. Leonard Boza, and they both came to my sister's house, knocking on the door, like 6 p.m., and it's December, it was winter, so it was dark out. She goes to get the door, and I'm at the dining room table, and they come walking in. And I'm like, embarrassed, because I'm a teenager. I'm like, why are they here? This is the principal of the school. But they tell my sister something really important. They said, we are not letting your sister fail. She must go on. She has potential, and we won't let her fall. And my sister broke down crying. I was stunned because, you know, again, I'm a teenager. I wasn't really sure what this all meant. But I'm listening, half embarrassed, but half encouraged. My sister's crying. And they were like, no, she has to make it. And so from that moment, they said, so we're going to do some stuff. That's what they said. There's Dr. White, she's from Brooklyn as well, Flatbush. She was like, I'm going to do some stuff. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? They carried me. My guidance counselor, she took me to tour colleges. I was like, I'm not going to college. I'm not doing anything. I'm done. They were like, get up, get in the car. You going to look at colleges. Mr. Boza, they took budget from the school to pay for my AP exams. They paid for all the college entry fees. They sat me down in their office and made sure I wrote those college essays. They, without me knowing, wrote submissions for, like, you know, when you graduate, you get, like, various organizations can give you scholarships here, $2,000 here, $500 here. I got, like, the most scholarships of any graduating senior when I finally got to that graduation stage. The awards night before that. I had no idea, they didn't tell me. My name kept getting called with all these organizations that gave scholarships. That whole year, how they took care of me. My Spanish teacher let me sleep in her spare bedroom for 3 months, and she would pick me up, because my sister lived out of the school district. So she would go all the way over there, pick me up, take me to school, take me there. A whole village came to the rescue. And that's when I knew my worth. Like, wow, I'm worth it. Like, this whole village won't let me fail.
Yeah.
And I ended up finishing high school and went on to college with one of the college. I got a full scholarship because they made me write those essays. And I just wrote my essays about what I was going through at the time. And but it was just amazing. That's when I knew my worth.
Wow. Yeah. And so it's powerful. We're about to turn it over here for questions from everybody here, but all of your, what everybody shared. So I'm staring at the slide here. That's real connections right there. That right there. That's real connections come to life, and that just helps in a number of different ways. And so now we want to hear from you. I'm sure there are different thoughts or questions. We got one back there and then up here, but time for 2 questions. Okay. We'll go ahead. We got one up here. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Yeah. Oh, well, for the folks virtually.
I love it.
All right,
For the
good af-
virtual people.
Know your worth.
Good afternoon, everyone.
interview
My
this
name
guy.
is Nicholas Brown. I attend Voorhees University, and my question is for you, Mr. Moody. When you got your ears pierced, right, at 50-something years old, you said?
65.
65. And that tattoo, like, what did that truly mean? I know people would be like, oh, he's just experimenting or being free, but what was the real connection, or what was the true empowerment of
Oh, yeah.
It's a tattoo. It says turn trauma into triumph. So it has a message and a meaning for me that I turn trauma to triumph. So I want to remind myself, and also when other people see it, it helps them know, hey, whatever I'm going through, it can be triumph. My peers steered, this was funny. I thought they were going to shoot that little gun, in my ear, so it'd be like, boom.
Oh.
I went to a real tattoo artist who did it, and they took that needle. I said, what you gonna do with that? And she said, that's how I'm doing your ear. Now, I'm gonna tell y'all the true story. I didn't know the forearm was so tender on a tattoo.
Oh.
I almost only had 2 letters. But I had to man up in there.
You in now.
Tears were kind of coming in my eyes. But let me tell you what it meant for me. Like in my company, I got people with pierced ears, pierced tongue. My son's hair all over. My daughter got 20-something tattoos. I got folks with the dreads, the whole thing. I said, look, just be good at what you do. That's all that matters. So when I got my ear pierced, I actually felt free. And my mother and father died 67 days apart in 2019. This is my mother's earring. So I wear my mother every day with me.
Deep meaning, yeah.
But it was freeing because I couldn't be that person when I was coming along because you didn't wear a pierced ear at work. And it's funny, I went to my Rotary meeting, and I belong to Downtown Atlanta Rotary, which is the hoity-toity one, you know, all the big head, the bougie, that'd be fine. And I had a couple people say, you know, they looked and said, "You gonna wear that earring?" I said, "Every day."
Every day.
I have not
That's who I
taken
am.
it out since in 4 years. It'll be 4 years in May. And it's freeing. And those are the kind of things that, you know, it's little things like that that you're going to go through in life where you're going to feel free to do and be who you are.
Oh, yeah. Any more questions? We got time? Yeah, we still got the time here. Time for one more? Okay. One more question. One more. Right here. Yeah. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kyrie White. I'm a sophomore computer engineering major from Baltimore, Maryland. And I attend Howard University, along with my other Howard University people. Some over there.
HU.
Yeah. But I have a question, honestly, kind of for you, Ms. Banks. You mentioned, like, you know, just your backstory. And I was kind of thinking about my own backstory. I'm the eldest of 8, and my mom's currently a single mom. And I've experienced recently kind of obstacles in terms of like getting down with stuff from back home. And you mentioned how like you had a village to help bring you up. And I feel like I also have a village, and I also feel like I have self-worth. But my whole being in the position that I am right now is because of my background, because of my family. So when things happen back home, it greatly like kind of limits me, and kind of like sometimes I get in just places where I get like paralyzed, like I can't do anything. And you can't stop, because when you have responsibilities, you got to keep going. How do you keep going despite those challenges, especially when you have strong connections to your family or people who are valued in your life?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and I feel you. You know, there's also a dynamic there. I'm curious if it's true for you, where not only are the folks back home that village and you care so much about them, but also they can't always relate to where you are now and where you're going. So there's also sort of like, oh man, like I want to help, and you just want to reach and grab and save, and you get this hero complex too. But at the same time, you're like, oh, but I can't stop. I gotta like stay focused. I gotta finish this exam. I gotta do this interview. I gotta go kill this presentation. And you just feel tugged back and forth. At least that's how I would feel. And one thing that really helped me is that we talked about earlier today, mentoring and coaches and things like that. Really having a mentor from like where I'm from really also helped me to stay grounded and to just have, because sometimes I also feel guilty, like, oh, I'm able to do this, but where I'm from, people don't get to do this. And they don't always understand when they see me doing certain things. Like I've been to almost 50 countries, and people where I'm from, the people from the block, most of them are on the block. So they just can't even relate to what I'm doing, and I feel guilty about it. And that also can be paralyzing. And so having a mentor from where I'm from, like from the rec center, and having those connections where people I can still talk to help bridge that gap, for me to feed me, is really, really key, has been so key for me. The other thing I've had to do is like sit family down and have the talk, the reverse talk.
The reverse talk.
Yeah, like you get the talk coming up, I'm like, okay, now I gotta give the talk.
Give you the talk, yeah.
And because they can't really always understand what's in my head, what's processing. And so it's like, hey, here's what I need as well. And here's what I can do, but also how do I start creating those boundaries? Like, hey, if I do this thing, here's what it could happen. Here's we all going down. If you like, if I can't go and pursue this thing or get this thing done. And so helping them to understand what I'm really dealing with, since they're not in my everyday sometimes, also was really freeing and empowering, because it's like, okay. So those are some of the things that has helped me, but I would love to talk to you after this. Okay?
Yeah. Powerful. All right. Yeah. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up here.
Take one more call.
One
One
more?
more question.
We got time? Yeah,
Yeah,
we're-
she had her hand raised.
Oh,
the
okay.
entire
Yeah.
time.
Go ahead. That'll be the last.
She's saying no. She the boss back there.
Yeah, come on, stand up.
It'll be really quick. Really quick. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Here you go.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Say, at least say the question.
Shoot your question. We'll just have a shorter break. We'll just have a shorter break.
Say the
Go
question.
Ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Anissa Watson. I'm a senior at Bowie State. My major is advertising design. So first, I did want to thank you all for having this because my senior thesis is actually about imposter syndrome.
Oh.
So my question was. I got you. So my question was directed towards Ms. Banks because your comment about it being like a other people syndrome, like it's their thoughts and feelings being projected on us. And you reminded me of this article that I read a couple years ago where they were talking about what we say to kids like when they're growing up, as far as like, oh, if they do something, you're like, oh, you're so smart, or you're such a good boy or good girl, and then those things kind of subconsciously get embedded. And I just wanted to ask what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I would agree. One of the things, what's interesting is sometimes we all have things that we gravitate toward just naturally, being who we are. So at a young age, I started to gravitate toward math and science, even at a really young age. But then that gets turned into, I remember I would get my report card, and I was that kid that can't shut up in class. I just couldn't shut up in class. Yes. You can tell. And so I would get my report card, and it would be like a few U's on there. I don't know if you remember back in the day, the U's. I'm aging, I'm dating myself. And my mom, she would look at my report card, and she had a really structured incentive program. She would say, okay, next report card, if you get rid of X number of U's, then you can get this thing. And then she would give me this talk about you're smart. You know you should be doing this, so you should be doing that. And as like a counterpoint to my misbehaving. And so I always just felt this pressure of like, yes, that's who I am. That's what I have to be. Like, I can't let her down. I have to because she would measure this thing every report card, and then she would withhold gifts. She had a closet she would lock up. And she would buy gifts ahead of time and put it in the closet. And then she'd be like, all right, you'll get that when I see a report card. And you'd be like, oh, she was like so stressed. And so ask me about the story about the Dolly Pops later. I got to tell you about the Dolly Pops if y'all remember Dolly. Anyway, so definitely that was kind of ingrained in me at a young age in terms of how I'm supposed to be. And I think that as you grow and you get, like I keep bringing up mentoring, there are ways to cope with that and change that narrative. I know, but she started it. We
listening now.
Yeah,
I encouraged.
Yeah. Well, I want to give everybody just a round of applause. Thank you so much again to everybody. Yeah.